Hello and welcome to the Voices of the Vic podcast and YouTube channel. Today we have a very special episode where we are joined by Andrew French, who is here to talk to us about the recent transfer window that happened over the summer. I'm also joined with Joe Thomas. How are you, Joe?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good. Been looking forward to this one all weekend. Hopefully, we can find out some cool information from Andrew. So yeah, looking forward to this one.
Yeah,
How
no,
about
it's going to
yourself?
be really good. I'm good too. Again, really excited. This was something that I put in the group chat a couple months ago. I said, hey, like I was like, I want to get Andrew on. I want to talk to him about the transfer window. I think he'd be really good for us. So I've been planning this. But Andrew, how are you? Thank you so much for coming on.
It's no trouble. I'm happy to do it. I hope I live up to the billing because in my house, I'm not even the most interesting person. So I will do my best to give you some insight. But no, I'm happy to do it. It feels like a long time ago that I spent 16 hours sat with my laptop open watching Sky News and checking my phone, and all I keep thinking is, all good. There's another 5 months till I have to do it again because it's a long day, transfer deadline day. I don't know how Sky do it, but then I suppose they have lots of different presenters, but you do end up padding and filling because, they don't do it to order. What I'd really like is 4 deadline day signings, one every 3 hours would be perfect, but it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. So how was the summer with the transfers? Were you super busy? Was it we started quite slow, but picked up at the end. But how was it for you?
I think from talking to Tom, there was players that he knew he'd get in quickly, so he was always confident that, say, Sissoko was going to come in quickly, and Vata came in quite early. But then there were others where he always said, look, if I get the player I want, it might go down to the last week, the last day. And I know people get very annoyed and they get fed up with hearing this domino effect, but in the case of Jebbison, for instance, Jebbison was a player that Tom mentioned to me June. This is the name I'm looking at. And at that time, Bournemouth still had Solanke. And when Jebbison went in, Bournemouth had made it clear it was with a view to loan him out. So Watford expressed their interest in that. And then Bournemouth sold Solanke. And Watford were told, don't worry, we've got a replacement lined up. But that's where the domino effect starts. You then need that replacement to be signed. You need him to be signed quite quickly. You need him to bed in. And it didn't happen in the time frame that Watford thought. So Det Jebbison played, 3 games, 2 in the Premier League, and started the cup tie. And I know that cup tie was it last Wednesday. Tom went to the London Stadium literally to watch it with his fingers crossed, hoping that Jebbison didn't get injured, because although people will say, well, why did Watford let that happen? It's not in Watford's control. He's Bournemouth's player. If they want to put him in goal, they can do that. We've got no say in it whatsoever. So it doesn't always go to plan, and certainly when you're a championship club, you're generally relying on something else happening for you to be able to do what you want to do. It's a bit different if you're Man United, Man City, Newcastle. You just go to the club you want and you buy the players you fancy. The further down the food chain you go, the more you're waiting for other things to happen. So, if you look at something like, say, Shaq Forward, who left Watford on deadline day, that was very late in the evening. That would partly be due to the fact that I'm guessing there were other things Bristol Rovers needed to do in order for that to happen. So transfers don't always go as straightforwardly as you'd like, and the domino effect is a real thing. But it was sort of a transfer window of 2 halves. We were quite busy at the start, then it all went quiet, and then in the last sort of week, 10 days, it all happened. And I think the net result was, I think we're in a better place than we were when we went into the window.
Yeah, no, and I would say the same. I think us as all Watford fans, I don't know if you were the same, Joe. We spoke on here over the summer. We were like, the transfer window is looking a bit rubbish. We haven't really signed anyone. The first wave of those players who came in, Bond, we were like, okay, goalkeeper, yeah, but realistically, he's just going to be a backup keeper. He's not really going to do much. Vata, it was a great signing, but again, we were like, he's young. Are we really going to see him that much? He's probably not going to have a massive, impact on the club, especially this upcoming season. I mean, I was a bit umming and ahhing about Sissoko as well because, old. wasn't really sure if he kind of had it in him anymore. What were your initial thoughts, Joe, about when those first wave of players came in?
Yeah, obviously we spoke a bit about on our initial podcast about these summer signings, and there obviously was quite a bit of a concern about sort of the players we were getting in. Like you say, Vata was young. There was a lot of question marks over whether we'd see him. It's still the same with a lot of the players that we've signed. I think there's still, there's a lot of obviously whispers over Twitter that some people have impressed more than others in games that have been played, whether it's by the academy or whether it's been in training, of when we're going to see people. Like obviously Tom said when we've signed certain people that he's one for the future as opposed to potentially being now. So it's like, well, who we're as exciting as it is that we've got these players, there's still the question marks over, do we have the cover in certain positions now, or are they people that are going to be coming in the future and we're going to potentially struggle in certain areas, or is Tom going to need to throw them in? Obviously, I'm going to butcher his name again. Is it Dom? No, hold on. Duamo. That's it. Duamo. He's obviously one that Tom said straight away that we would see him more in the future. He's not a player that's going to come straight into the first team. But then there's a lot of people that have been talking on Twitter. I don't know if you've seen this, Andrew, where people have said that actually Tom's been a bit more impressed with him than he may have actually first thought when he came in. So there is a potential maybe that we might see him earlier. And obviously, based on what we saw yesterday in the Sheffield United game, this was something I spoke about, Caity, wasn't it? I was a bit concerned that there wasn't that backup in central midfield, what with Loser being injured. Obviously, there's still a question mark over when he's going to come back. So is he going to come into the fold a little bit earlier? Perhaps. Obviously, I don't know if you've been told anything about this, but yeah, there's certain areas. Obviously, the Vata, I was really excited about Vata coming in. People said at Celtic that I know that Celtic fans said that he was like really exciting, great young player, but he's not really been seen much. Only obviously in the League Cup. So yeah, I guess it is exciting. We've had a better window than what we anticipated at the beginning. However, it's just the case when we're going to see these players. I think I don't know what you think, Andrew, and whether you know more about these players and when they're going to potentially feature.
Let's go back over a few of the ones you named there. So Sissoko, I always thought was going to be a very, very useful signing, and that's not based on me knowing a great deal more about football than any other fan. It was based on Slaven Bilic, who I get on with very well and still talk to, going to the ends of the earth to try and get him to come back in that January 23 window. He desperately wanted him back. Sissoko wanted to come, but for whatever reason, the club didn't sanction it. But Bilic was always adamant, had he been able to get Sissoko in, we would have seen a massive difference in the second half of that season. Then when Tom came in, talking to Tom before the end of the season, he was saying, I think I'm going to be able to get Sissoko back. And you just asked him why. And he said the same sort of things that Bilic said. He's a great example. He's a great leader. He'll do wonders in the dressing room. Physically, I haven't got a concern about him, although he's 34. He's a proper athlete. And I remember actually talking to Craig Cathcart around that time. And he said, look, if Watford gets Sissoko back in, that will be a brilliant move for the club. And so you've got a guy who's played, several international games, the former manager of Croatia, and an England international who's now managing our team, all saying that Sissoko would be a good move. So I tend to go with their opinions. And I liked Sissoko anyway. I thought he was a bit hard done by in that Premier League season. I think, he was probably our best player. Kamara won player of the season, but I think that was as much because he sort of waved at people and, shook hands and kissed babies. He was the best bit of a really crappy second half of the season. But I think if you take a step back, I thought Sissoko was probably the most consistent. He didn't have to do much that season to be our best player because we were rank, but he did stand out. Then he left for France and he got some stick for that. But I think that was more that the club wanted him off the wage bill than anything else. And he did go to a club that paid us a fee. It would have been easier for him to go to a club that didn't offer a fee because he would have pocketed more money. So all in all, I felt from what people that I'd spoken to had said to me and what I'd seen myself, I thought Sissoko was a good move. With someone like Vata, I think we always get excited when you get a young talent. But if you think back when João Pedro first came, we didn't see a great deal of him early on. And then when Jasper Spreer came, we didn't see a great deal of him. And I remember both Rob Edwards, Bilic, and even Chris Wilder saying that, with players like that, when they're precocious talents, you can't, in their opinion, just throw them in and expect them to play 30 games because in the early stages of their career, their level of performance will go up and down. So we've seen Vata, I think it's maybe 1 or 2 cup ties and a couple of friendlies. He is a very, very good player. And given time, I'm sure he'll have a massive impact on the team. But on Sunday, I could understand why Watford fans would like to see him on because we were lacking that bit of spark. And I asked Tom afterwards and he said, well, in his opinion, bringing on Jefferson and bringing on Barr were 2 young players who weren't particularly experienced and hadn't played a lot of first-team football. And he thought if you put a third one on as well, there was just too much inexperience in the top line. And he said particularly he was worried about what they did off the ball. He said, I know on the ball, those 3 players are very, very good. But he said, it's what you do out of possession that's half the task. He said, and we just haven't had enough time to work with all 3 of them on what we expect of them out of possession. And I suppose, if you think back to the days when you were at school, there were players who were, they were always fascinated and wanted the ball when you're going forward, but they weren't too keen about tracking back. And maybe that's the case in some of these instances where you just have to coach into players that, when the ball goes in the opposite direction, you've got to go with it too. So that was his explanation. I haven't written that up yet, but that was his explanation for Vata. But he said, he values him really highly, and I'm sure we'll see him. But at the moment, up until, say, Sunday, you couldn't argue with Georgie being in the team. He didn't have a particularly great game Sunday. Same with Edo Kambe. Okay, there's split opinion on whether he's the number 10 that solves what we need, but he scored 3 goals. So would you have left either of those out for Vata? I don't think so. Would you have made Vata a sub? Yeah, I would have done, but Tom's explanation was a fair one. I think, when you say we've brought in a lot of young players, I don't necessarily see that being a bad thing. Especially if we can bring them in, they serve us well, and then we sell them on for profit. We mustn't be, naive and bashful. That's how clubs like Watford operate. That's how it's always been. When I was a young fan, I remember Watford, buying or getting John Barnes for next to nothing and selling him on for £900,000. I remember signing Maurice Johnston from Partick Thistle for 100 and something thousand and selling him on for 3 or 4 times that. That's how Watford have always operated. It's always been the way. We are always going to be a selling club, even in the Premier League. And if you look at the Premier League, nearly all the clubs there are selling clubs as well. There aren't many who could say that they will never, ever need to sell a player. Maybe Man City, maybe Arsenal, maybe Liverpool. But if you look at the sort of next rung down, they all sell players. So I think it's quite exciting looking at some of the people we've brought in and some of the potential talent we've got there. And also think it's been very wise that we've signed a couple of old heads, that we brought in someone like Ogbonna. And I think on Sunday, for the first time, we showed a little bit at the back that we just needed someone there who could do what Sissoko does for the midfield, who could just organise things. Because after they'd scored, I felt for the next 10 minutes, we just looked like rabbits in headlights. We didn't quite know what to do. And you were looking for some more experienced defender to grab hold of things. And that's why the one loss, I think, that really hurts us is Hoot. I think very good left-footed defenders who are quick and can pass the ball are rare in football, bar none. And we happen to have one. And I think that's a real shame that he's gone. And even with the signings we made, unless we're going to play Ogbonna on the left side of a 3, which we might, but he might be done for pace there, we haven't got that quick left-footed defender that gives you the option. We've got players who are right-footed who can play on the left, Matty Pollock or Ryan Porteous do you a good job there. But as we've seen with people like Jeremy Ngakia, when you play on the left and you're right-footed, your natural tendency is to want to get it onto your strong foot. So you end up coming inside all the time and it narrows things down. But that's the one I think's hurt us the most, losing Hoot. But I think we've also made some decent signings. And we may see them come to fruition over a longer period of time. But bar the midfield, where we probably could have done with another body, I think we've done okay. Having said that, I watched the under-21s today at Sheffield United, which ignore the score, which was embarrassing. Duomo had an excellent game. And I know Tom had said initially that he thought Duomo was one for the future, but he's since said, having seen him in training and again today, that that needs to be reassessed, because he today for the under-21s looked like a man in a boys' game. Unfortunately, we were playing another team that had 10 men or 11 men looking against boys, because you don't get beaten 8-2, and it could have been 12. But Duomo was good. And we may well have stumbled upon someone there who could come in a little bit sooner. So if that's the case, if you've got Sissoko, Delabashiru, Louza, Duomo, Ramirez of Spain as a sort of fifth option, Kayambe could drop back there if you needed to. Maybe not signing that midfielder won't be such the problem that we thought it would. I mean, I try and see the positive in things. People could say, well, you're massively giving them, cutting them some slack. But I think at the moment it would be harsh to criticise the club too much on and off the pitch. I think they've backed Tom in the window like we hoped they would. They've got in the players that he obviously said he wanted. And on the pitch, we've delivered 5 wins in 6 games, which, I defy anyone to have said to me in June, that's what you're going to get, because I didn't. And, I really think I'm positive. So I think there's a lot to be encouraged by, with the caveat that we are only 1 month into the season. And as Tom pointed out the other day, I think when we went up in 21, Reading were top of the league now, and I think they'd won 5 or 6 of their first games. And they ended up falling away and finishing mid-table. So a good start is just that. It's a good start. It's just an indication. I think the real time you sort of look at it is maybe the November international break, when we'll have played 10 or 12 league games, and we'll know where we are then. That was a very long answer.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I feel like Cleverley's been backed this window to, people could have said, well, we didn't really spend a lot of money, but we've brought in 11 players or 12 players, I'm not sure. But, I feel like if we had brought in a bunch of too old players, everyone would be complaining. But now that, it feels like you can't really win, because everyone's like, oh, everything we've brought in, they're too young, they're inexperienced. So it feels like you can't really win, because realistically, we're not going to go to all these Premier League clubs and sign their best 25, 26, 27-year-old players, because it's just not how it works.
No, I think you're right, Caity. I looked today at the sort of transfer dealings of the other clubs, and I think it was certainly less than half had spent more money than they brought in, which is, that's what we get accused of. We bring in 30 million, we spend 3. Yeah, I see there's a massive difference between the two, but as I referenced earlier, that's always been the way. Maybe the gap between what we bring in and what we spend is a bit bigger than it should be, but we did at least spend some money. And, when you look up the road at our friends up the M1, they've spent far less than they brought in, and they've also got the parachute money. So it's not quite as simple as just saying, well, let's throw some money at it. I do think they've backed him. Tom feels they've backed him. You read his quotes. I talked to him privately as well, and he's always very straight up. He was really happy with what the business was that they did in the window. He would have liked to bring in a midfielder, but he doesn't think it's the be all and end all. And people will say, well, the midfielder we went for, could we have done more? Yeah, you could have done, but then are you gonna want to pay more than you think that person's worth? Are you going to want to be held to ransom by the club he's at? Are you going to want to pay a lot more than you think is the going price? Watford aren't in that position to just throw money around. We're not one of the rich clubs anymore. And even when we were affluent, we really, our best business, I think, was when we bought low and sold high. I think looking back on previous transfers, I think things started to go a bit belly up when we started paying 30-odd million for people like Ismail Assar, because there was no way we were going to turn a profit on that. It was hard to imagine we could buy him and sell him on for profit, which has always been Watford's model. So some of our best dealings are the ones where we buy players and they're good for us for 2 or 3 years, and either we sell them at a profit or we let them go because they've come to the end of their natural shelf life. And I think in some of the young players that we've brought in, there's a lot of headroom for development and growth. And alongside them, we've brought in one or two older heads like Sissoko and Ogbonna, who will help with that on and off the pitch.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. So sort of just going back to some of the first wave of players that we sort of lost. Obviously, we lost people like Hamer and Ashley Fletcher and those people we don't really care about. But one of the biggest losses that we had was Kone leaving. Can you sort of tell us if there was anything in that? Was he always going to leave? Was there any chance he was going to stay?
I think
What sort of happened there?
I think from what I can gather, the players that we could have, if you looked at the players we could have made money out of in the summer, Spear was the obvious one. After Spear, it was Kone and Loser. And Loser, if you think back to January, we struggled to find him a club to go to. He ended up on loan at Lorient, who were bottom of the French league and went down. So I think that when you're a club that's looking to raise a bit of money, if you get a decent offer like we did for Kone, then you're going to take it. He's a good player, there's no doubt about that. But also you've got to look at it from the player's point of view. If you say no to that and you don't sell, he's going to look at you and think, well, I could have gone and played French top-tier football. And instead, I'm stuck in mid-table championship. I think it's very hard to say to a young player, no, you've got to stay here. As long as the conditions are right, as long as the money you're getting is good, which I thought it was, and it's the right club for him, which he was really happy with. So I had no real problem with that. I don't think the club had any problem with him. I think it was a case of he was a bright light last season when we didn't have too many. He attracts attention. It's no surprise it's a French club because of the French-Canadian connections. There's a lot of people there who would know about him. And for him, really good move. I think he's only going to go from strength to strength. He's a very, very good player. So I wasn't overly surprised. You'll have to keep them all. But if one was going to go, then I think at the price we got, that was a decent deal.
Yeah, no, there wasn't any bad blood when he left. Everyone was quite well, fair enough, you're going to leave. We got good money, like you said. And yeah, so there was obviously then we got sort of the last wave of all the players who were leaving, and we all knew that Yasser was going to go at some point. And even with Yasser and Hoot, there was obviously quite back and forth. They were sort of coming to the games, but then he was linked with this. There was rumours flying left, right, and centre. Every day it was a new club that he was apparently having a medical at, and all this stuff going on. And Joe, you even you spoke to Hoot, didn't you, at the game? And you said,
so after sorry to cut in, Caity, after the game
no, go on.
Against Stoke, I saw him coming out. He was chatting to family or friends, and he walked down the road, and I just kind of went up to him and just said to him, how you doing, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, yeah. I said, are you going to be leaving? And he said, I don't really want to. It's kind of out of my hands. Was that the case? Was it out of his hands? Was it something that was, because, even obviously, he had time for everybody coming out of the ground. He still was really interactive with the fans. He was still wanting to.
He played.
Yeah,
he played in the that friendly.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he was still obviously heavily involved in the club. So it's not like he was, there's a lot to be said about these two transfers that have just gone on with Yasser and Hoot, because they stayed within the club. Like Caity said, they were going to games. They were, Yasser was going around the pitch after games, and he was still celebrating like he was part of the club. If I look back on other players over the Poser era that potentially have been linked with moves, you hear about them leaving and then they're just frozen out. You don't see them at the club. Are they in the ground today? Are they here? Are they leaving? But these two in particular seem really happy within the club and like they wanted to still be around. So was it a case, like I say, with Hoot especially, was it that the club just wanted to try and get as much as they could because his contract was going down, or did Hoot actually want to leave?
So if you wind back to the end of last season, I sat down with Wes I think it was either just before or just after the last game, and did a sort of reflection on the season. And he was very honest. He's always been a good interviewer. He doesn't pull any punches. He's a good laugh. He's very, very good to talk to, but he gives you straight answers. And off the record, then not so much off the record, but after we finished, we talked about the coming season. And I said, would you think you'll be here? He said, I'd like to, but I know I'm going to have to do some negotiating because I'm at the upper end of the salary scale, and the club, are going to find it hard to match what I'm on now. But, there's a conversation to be had. Whatever that conversation was, they obviously couldn't meet at a point that they were happy with. I don't know yet what the sort of percentage cut the club are expecting Wes to take. He said to me that he'll do an interview with me either this week or next, and we might find out a bit more then, or he might decide just to keep that to himself. But in these sort of negotiations, I know Wes was looking for 3 years. I think the club were looking for 2. So you've got a player who wants an extra year, and you've got a club who wants him to take a pay cut, and it's a bit like a staring contest. Who's going to blink first? I always thought, and I know Tom did, and he said as much, that there would be some compromise reached, some middle ground. And that was probably the case up until the week before that Stoke game. And then things started to change, and it wasn't looking like it was going to happen. I mean, back in the summer, I know Wes was linked with various Turkish clubs, and I didn't really see that one happening because it wouldn't have been a step up in his footballing career, and I don't think he would have earned any more money than he could have done anywhere else. And at that time, when you've got a player, if you're an agent, if you've got a player who's not sure where their future is, it's your job to try and attract attention and raise their profile. So I'm pretty certain there was a bit of kite flying going on there. There may have been interest from a Turkish club, but once that happens, then every other Turkish club in the world is linked with him. When Saudi Arabia came on the scene, then that was different because obviously Saudi Arabia can pay wages that other countries just can't pay. When you see the money that Ivan Toney's being paid, it's eye-watering. It would set you up for life. You would never need to worry again. And obviously Watford couldn't compete with that. But even when those rumours were circling, and they're definitely, what he's seen now, there was at least one, maybe 2 Saudi Arabian clubs who were interested in Wes. He was still staying here, like you said, he was still coming to games. So it went down, not quite to the wire, but it went down to the penultimate week. And I'll know more once I've spoken to him. But, he did say, I saw his message on Instagram that, he would like to have stayed. Will we ever get the club side of it? I don't know. And it may be that when I talk to Wes, you get a slightly one-dimensional picture of what went on. But I never got the impression that he sort of walked in and said, I'm leaving. I think he more went in and said, look, I'd like to stay. Can we make it happen? And then for whatever reason, it didn't happen. Now, the club in their wisdom may turn around and say, well, look, we tried to be fair, but he wouldn't come down from a salary point that we couldn't meet. And as he's gone to Saudi Arabia, obviously, there's no way we could compete with that. But from the player's point of view, even if you're playing in front of small crowds in Saudi Arabia, you're earning loads of money. So from a purely personal perspective, and there's others. I mean, Will Troost-Ekong is out in Saudi Arabia now. Slaven Bilic was there, but he's left. So it is somewhere you can go and play a reasonable standard of football and a lot of money. It is seen as the retirement league because it's sort of the place you go to when you're getting towards the end of your career. But then Ivan Toney is perhaps the exception, and 1 or 2 others. But I until I've talked to Wes, I won't know a lot more. But everything he said to me up to the point where the deal was done was, I would like to stay. So I'd like to think there isn't any bad feeling, but certainly not on his part. I mean, when he'd signed for Al Shabab that night, he sent me a message and he just sort of thanked me for, sort of helping him over, which is nice. It's nice, and he's about to stay in touch. And when I said about doing an interview, yeah, I'd love to do that. So we'll see. I know when Will Troost-Ekong left, he said to me he wanted to do the interview, and we waited about a year and did it because players don't often get the chance to put their side of the story across, and they just want the actual facts to be heard. So we'll find out. I'll see what Wes has got to say. With Yasser, again, going back to the end of last season, the club made it quite clear they weren't going to be looking, they weren't touting Yasser around. It wasn't like they were actively looking to sell him. If they could keep him, then they would. That was the feeling. But I think they were also not naive enough to think that no one was going to be interested. You know, he's a very, very good player who also has one of the busiest agents you will ever encounter. And that's agent number 2. As I wrote, there's a first agent that he had back in Colombia who's got a contract, which is, it's not funny, but he sent me a copy of the contract and it's got Yasser's thumbprint, his mum's thumbprint, his dad's thumbprint, and the agent's thumbprint. You know, and it's all, I was waiting for him to send me a file of their blood as well to show me that they'd done a deal. Obviously, this agent linked up with the family when he was playing in Colombia. And then Yasser's come over to England and raised his profile. And along comes this other agent who, from what I can see of it, only has 2 players, which is Yasser and the guy at Aston Villa, John Duran, who are both Colombian internationals. And obviously, John Duran going to Villa, that was a nice payday. But if you're an agent, your only real way of making money is to move players on, get transfers, get them a wage increase, whatever. So as soon as the season ended, well, if you think back through last season, Yasser was linked with everybody. Barcelona, AC Milan, Arsenal, you know, he was going everywhere and anywhere. And I'm not stupid enough to think that they were genuine links. That was his agent putting him out there. You know, and I think I've written this before, you know, when I worked for Watford and when I worked for Charlton, I would do that sort of thing if the club asked me to. You know, you'd fly a kite and drop a name in somewhere, and it's just common practice. It's maybe not the most ethical thing in the world, but it goes on. Agents do it, clubs do it. And so when we saw those sort of clubs, I just thought that's maybe a tier too high for Yasser at the moment. Well, when we get to the summer, I'm guessing at that point his agent has said to Yasser, look, you know, I'm going to get you a really big move here. We're both going to be happy. And, you know, if you're a young Colombian who's in England and you're told you could be going to Barcelona or AC Milan, you're going to get very excited. I think reality bit a little bit when the actual talk started and he was going to places like Rennes, that, you know, which is not quite AC Milan or Barcelona, because when push came to shove, that was the level that we're interested in him. But he was always going to go. I think once he knew there was a chance to play for a top tier club, which is what you want, whether it's in England, Spain, France, or wherever, he was always going to go. It was just which club it was going to be and probably which one his agent thought gave the best terms for everybody. I mean, if you look at some of the pictures on Yasser's Instagram, you know, there's him with his agent in the Girona Stadium, him with his agent, his mum and dad, him with his mum and dad, him with his sisters and brothers. You know, it's like a big circus and they all fly around the world. And I've never seen so many pictures of an agent and a player on a private jet. And they were always on a private jet eating a plate of fruit, you know, and it's just like a summer thing. It was, you know, it was like they needed a T-shirt with tour dates on it for where Yasser was going to be. You know, Monday Girona, Tuesday Rennes, Wednesday Leicester. So once the bid started coming in, and there was also a level they had to get to. Watford weren't going to sell him for cheap. They'd made that quite clear. They didn't want to sell him. They weren't actively looking to sell him, but if they did sell him, it had to be at the right price. And I think once figures of around 20 million started to be suggested, then I thought, yeah, this is going to happen. It's just a case of how long. But obviously he contracted to Watford. And so after he'd been to the Copa America and had the most extended of extended breaks after that and spent his time jetting off around eating fresh fruit, he came back to Watford. And then Tom had a choice. And, you know, I spoke to Tom and he said, there's a number of reasons why I'm not going to play him. Is, you know, first of all, I don't think he's going to be here very long. If that's the case, I don't know if his heart's really in it. But also, if he is wanting to move, do I really want to make a young player go and play and potentially get injured when it could scupper a deal? Now, you might say, well, surely you put Watford's interests first. Well, yeah, you do. And if you're going to get 20, 25 million pounds for a player, you don't jeopardise that by giving him 15 minutes in the second half against Stoke. You just don't do that. No. So I thought Yasser handled it as well as he could. He came to games, you know, he was with his teammates. He was enjoying the wins. He was posing with pictures with kids. But as we all know, once a deal's done, and he was on his way. So I think the money we got for Yasser was good. I can't believe he won't go on to bigger and better things, you know. And there's a strong link between Girona and Manchester City. If he did well at Girona, that's the sort of place he might go to. But he's got so much potential. He didn't always do as much as I thought he could do at Watford. There were games when, he was a little bit anonymous, but then a little bit like João Pedro, when you're potentially the best player in a team where there's some average players, you can't always be the star every week. João Pedro's now is in a Brighton team where there are many good players. So if he has a bad game or a quiet game, you don't notice it. At Watford, when João Pedro had a bad game, we noticed it because the other 10 weren't able to carry us. So I think Yasser will benefit from being around better players at a higher level, but he was always, decent at Watford. Tom spoke very highly of him. I interviewed him a couple of times. And it's hard to get to know someone when you don't speak the language, but he always had a laugh, a sense of humour, and that's all you can ask from him. And I really hope he goes on to be, a real star, because I think for a club like Watford, it's a bit like when when you're in your job and you have an apprentice or a trainee and you train them up and they leave you, and then years later you find out they're the MD of GlaxoSmithKline or something. You go, well, a little bit of that success came down from us, and I think that's what Watford can do. We can look at someone like João Pedro and hopefully Yasser in the future when they're a big star and say, well, that's our boy. We did that, because we're never going to hold on to him. We couldn't hold on to John Barnes. Luther Bissett went to AC Milan. All our best players eventually will go somewhere else because we're not the biggest club in England. We're not in top tier at the moment. So enjoy them while they're here, relish their success, and then when they go on, you can be proud that we had a part to play in it.
Yeah, no, I think you summed it up great. I don't feel there's no bad blood between it. I mean, Hoop maybe, but because I just didn't expect him to go. But the way that you've explained it makes it a bit more clearer in the sense of like, it wasn't necessarily his decision, but also, he's getting on a bit. Realistically, if you're just competing with that money from what Watford will be offering him and what the Saudi club will be offering him, it's just like you can't even negotiate with that. You're obviously going to go there, especially as you're approaching the end of your career. That's going to, like you said, set you up for life. But I think after those players obviously decided that they were leaving, we did sign some good players at the end of the window. And I just wanted to ask both of your guys' opinions on who you think is the best signing that we've done this summer, or someone who you think is going to, stand out this season. So, Joe, who do you think has been the best signing so far this summer?
You know what? Obviously, we've not seen him yet, but I'm really excited to see what Ogbona's going to bring to our defence. Like, I'm really I don't know about you, Andrew, but like for me, the signings that we've made is kind of reminding me about going back to when AD was at Watford, and we kind of brought in a mix of like young and old, and they kind of just, we didn't have any money. It was all very new. There was a brand new team. It was a young person who never managed before, and they just came together and it worked. And obviously we'd had a bad start, but then obviously progressively got better. Obviously with this side, we've actually had a good start, but Ogbonna, I think with his age and his experience and the quality that he showed at West Ham, I think he can really help bring on the guys that we've got in defence at the moment, especially people like Matty Pollock, who's still young. Sky Sports were really talking him up yesterday to be something really special. I was like, I'm so glad the window's shut, because obviously people watching this, they'd be like, crikey, yeah, this guy is actually good, if they were to go back and watch highlights of him throughout the season so far. But yeah, I've just got shades of this team could actually just come together, gel, and potentially do something a bit more special than what we might have actually expected come like July time, when we were sort of bringing people in with everyone was a bit like, oh, well, I don't know how we're going to do. I mean, I certainly, if someone would have said to me come the end of the Plymouth game that we'd have won 5 out of 5, I'd have laughed in people's faces and gone, you're having a laugh. But we've obviously exceeded expectations there. I know we lost at the weekend. I don't actually think that was a bad performance yesterday. I completely agree with everything Tom said with the team just couldn't get in any rhythm in the second half. I thought it was a very even first half. But yeah, sorry, I did completely digress from the question. But yeah, Ogbonna was mine. I don't know what you think, Andrew, and who you.
I'm going to have a couple. As I say, I'm a big fan of Sissoko. I was a crap footballer. Let's get that out there. But Sissoko played in a similar sort of position to me and did the sort of thing that I tried to do badly. I just love the fact that when he's on his game, you feel like, you give him the ball in any situation, any position, facing any direction, and he's going to look after it for you. So I like that element of it. I like the fact that, the younger players will learn from him. And as I say, when people like Bilic and Cleverley and Cathcart speak so highly of someone without being prompted, it wasn't like I said, can you tell me some good things about him? We're just talking generally. When people like that who know their stuff say, look, Moussa Sissoko is a good bloke to have at your club, then yeah, that's enough for me, on top of the fact that I like the way he plays. The one that I'm looking forward to seeing that I think will be really exciting is Ebosele, because he just reminds me of a left-footed Ryan Andrews, in as much as he's got explosive pace. He's built like a brick outhouse. He's a big old boy, but he can motor. And I know from a colleague who covers Derby that he was really impressive at Derby, and they didn't want him to leave. But at the time his contract was running out, they were under a Football League embargo, so they couldn't offer him a contract. So that's how Udinese managed to get hold of him for nothing, was that Derby couldn't keep him. I thought at the time when he went to Udinese that he'd be one of those ones that mysteriously then decided to be loaned to us, but it didn't happen. He stayed at Udinese and he played a fair bit of Serie A football, and he's got himself into the Ireland team. In the way we play, with sort of the two wing backs being a massive attacking outlet for us, who've got to be really fit and strong and can get up and down the line and, can get in behind. The thought of Andrews on one flank and Ebosele on the other is really quite exciting. If we can get those two flying with someone like Georgie and Edo, or Georgie and Vata, whoever it is, then we won't have too many games like we had on Sunday where we didn't have that much attacking threat. I think, you've got good backup there. I know people say, well, Ken Semler's not getting any younger. Yeah, but if he's not the first choice, if you're asking him to play 15 or 20 minutes as a sort of a, rotation, and on the other side, you've got Andrews, Ebosele, Semler, there's width there and pace and power that I think will be of a threat and a worry to other teams. And I think I looked at the end of the game yesterday, and Sheffield United are going to be up there. They're a big-time team who have signed a lot of players, a massive stadium, huge following. And the last 10 minutes, even though they were on top and we didn't look like scoring, there was real nerves in that ground. And I didn't experience that much last season. When teams got ahead of us in away games, they generally went to pipe and slippers mode and just watched us flounder for the rest of the game. Yesterday, the 10 minutes to go, they were nervous. You looked at Chris Wilder at the end, he's whipping the crowd up. When they finished, he's punching the air. Their players, took a lap of honour, Luton style. It was, I think you have to accept that sometimes the way we perceive Watford, and maybe fans of their own clubs, each of their own clubs are the same, that we look at it and say, oh, we're not as good as we think we are. We haven't got many good players. But outside of that, maybe the perception is different. And I know Chris from working with him, and he said, I think Watford are a lot stronger than maybe their own fans give them credit for. He said that the players you've got now are infinitely better than the ones that I managed 18 months ago. So I think there's a lot of clues there that teams are going to see us as a threat. Maybe not as a threat to win the league, but as a team that that could be top 10, as Tom said, top 8 potentially. We've started really well, and we've got all the threats there. Now, the key thing, and it really is the key thing, is please, those who run the club, step back and let him get on with it. Just let him get on with it, because he's given you the best start that we've had in many seasons. We've massively exceeded any expectation. He's got the players he wants. You've backed him on that. Now leave him to get on with it. Let him do what he's shown he's good at, because he has taken a team that last season were pretty awful, and at the end of last season, in those 9 games, transformed into a side that, okay, we weren't very exciting, but we were hard to beat, and we never looked like going down, as was the threat just before he came. Now, with the new signings, he's got a different way of playing. different mindset. We could be on the cusp of something far better than we thought. So, that's the thing I hope, is that those who run the club, particularly the owner, just leave him be, let him get on with it. And, if we have a couple of bad results, don't panic. Don't worry about it. It's, unless we're in relegation trouble, this season is not one where we'd expect to be going up. So we're going to struggle to sort of underachieve against expectation, but there's a good chance we could overachieve. But that will only happen if the manager and the players don't think that there's a change just around the corner. We need to think that there's going to be some stability and some consistency. And so that's, in a nutshell, what I think is going to be key now, is that every time we get to a European or international break, we aren't worried that we're going to make a change, because generally around sort of September, October, that's when they like to, hook the manager and bring another one in. But it hasn't worked. That we've tried everything. When you look at it, we've had ex-England managers, Premier League winners, young managers, old managers, English managers, foreign managers. What we've never had is time. We've never given anybody a great deal of time. And some of them didn't deserve it. Let's be honest, some of them were pretty bad. But the signs are, back end of last season and now, we're becoming a team that's got some spine, got some backbone, it's got a bit of flair. Up until Sunday, we'd scored, 15 in 5 games. We could be in for a fun time, but it'll only be fun if the people who do the coaching on the football side of things are left to get on with it and left to work with the tools they've been given. Otherwise, it'll just end up being a proper mess again. Which, I suppose, in a way, when you look at today's events with Rajovic being potentially going out on loan, that could suck out some of the good feeling, because even though he may not be people's idea of a perfect number 9, and he probably wouldn't be my idea of a perfect number 9, it just slightly concerns me that we've gone back to having 2 strikers instead of 3. So we've only got 2 options, really, neither of whom we own. So we've got Jefferson on loan from Bournemouth, and the slightly comical Bayo, who wants to play Serie A but has decided he's happy to do another year with us on loan. But we don't own either of our number 9s. The one we do own looks like he's going out to Denmark. And so we've only got the 2 to alternate. Then our options are Doumbia, who's very, very young and raw, Barr, who isn't really a number 9. So I just hope that by doing this, there's a good reason why they've done it, and that they explain to us why potentially our top scorer from last season is going out on loan, because we've already lost our player of the season, we've lost our young player of the season, and now it looks like we're losing our top goal scorer. And it takes something for any team to absorb 3 losses like that, especially when one of them, in the Rajovic case, seems to be of Watford's own choosing. So I just hope that doesn't undo any of the goodwill or the positivity, because it's been nice going to Watford games so far this season. I wasn't enjoying it last season at all. And I'm very fortunate I get paid to go, but I do. My week is defined by how the team does. If the team win, I have a much happier week than if they lose. And also, there's nothing worse than seeing fellow fans not happy, not enjoying it. Never mind the results, just not liking the vibe they're getting from the club or the way the club behaves. And yet, since Tom came in, and particularly this summer, there's been a real feel-good factor, I think. And, that may dissipate very quickly. But we've got a much better chance if people now, having given Tom what he's asked for and seen what he can do and got the sort of the green shoots of a recovery, just step away now and let him get on with it, because that's the best thing they could do for everybody, is to not meddle and interfere. And probably I've just talked myself into being banned from the training ground or something. But
Can I ask a question, actually, just because you mentioned Ebosele? One thing, obviously, I was keen to know is, obviously, you mentioned like having him one side and Andrews on the other. Is the intention when Tom plays him to play him on the left-hand side? Or
no, I probably spoke out of turn there a little bit. I mean, I'm thinking from what Tom said the other week, where he talks about he likes having the option to have sort of inverted wing backs, if that's what you call them now. You could do that with Ebosele down one side and Andrews down the other. I mean, obviously, Ebosele is more would look on paper to be more as a direct competition for Andrews, because that's where he's played. But if you wanted to go all out bombard and switch a right foot around to the left, then Ebersele could do that. But no, you're probably right. It's probably more a case of Ebersele and Andrews vying for the position on the right.
So with that in mind, then brings me to another question: is the Ngakia injury that he's currently got worse than what has kind of been mentioned? Is he going to be out for longer, which is why Ebersele has been brought in, or is Ngakia going to come back and go back into that left-hand side position? Because I don't know about you and what you thought, but the last game he played when he was hauled off after, I think, 60 minutes, I think that was Stoke, wasn't it? That he, I thought he looked really weak, and I didn't actually think he suited that position at all. So if Andrews, I think, has started the season brilliantly. He's really impressed me. He actually even looks really good with his left foot. Like, he actually looks like he's been practicing a bit over pre-season, so he can use both feet, which is great. And obviously Ebersele is a great player. So if Ngakia is going to be on the right-hand side, is he now third choice, or does Tom see him as is it a bit of a concern?
I think Joe, with Ngakia, and I don't know the ins and outs of his injury, but obviously just by dint of the fact that we've signed another player who plays in the same position suggests that there's some concern about his, ability to play enough games to be a viable contender for that position. You've only got to look back over the last 2 or 3 seasons and see how many games he's played and realise that he maybe isn't quite as robust as we'd like. So that's one reason I think Ebersele's come in, is that you need to have pressure on that player, and also you need to be able to rotate. You can't expect. Well, I mean, when I was a kid, players did play 40 odd games a season, but now the sort of the trendy thing is to give them a rest, rotate them out, whatever. But if you haven't got an option, then you can't do that. That player is stuck in the position. And also, in terms of a player's mindset, I don't think it's useful if you think, well, I'm the only fit person who can play here, so don't matter what I do, I'm pretty much guaranteed to be on the team sheet. So I don't know the ins and outs of Ngakia's injury. Like you, I didn't think that he particularly suited playing down the left-hand side, because on the occasions when he went beyond the fullback, as I said, when you're right-footed, you'll want to get it onto your stronger foot. So you're chopping back inside. What you really want is something that Barr does really well. I think he did it for the winner against was it Derby, when he went, just went past the fullback, got to the byline, and because it was on his right foot and he's right-footed, he was able to pull it back. Georgie has a shot, and Sissoko finishes off the rebound. That's what I was brought up on. That was the wing play I remember. You basically face up the winger with the fullback, you knock it past them and run, and that's great. But when you get to the byline, if it's not your right or your strong foot, you've then got to stop and come back the other way. So I think that although Tom has said he likes using those inverted fullbacks, and I think he will, and I think he's one of those coaches who will mix things up a little bit, but he's obviously going to have a core way of playing, and that would be either Andrews or Ebersele on the right, and then either Larouci or Sema on the left, and that gives you 4 options in those 2 wing-back positions. In the past, someone like Bilic has swapped them over. So I remember Ken Sema playing out on the right and coming inside in his left foot a lot. Tom said he might do that. But I think, I probably spoke out of turn there. I think Ebersele and Andrews on the right, Larouci and Sema on the left. We've still got to see a bit of Larouci. I thought he looked decent against Derby, was it? Yeah, it was Derby.
Stoke especially as well.
Yeah, less so on Sunday. I thought he had, maybe it was because he was going back to the club he used to play for. But, my memory of him on Sunday is looking like a screw that was being drilled into the ground. He just kept spinning because every time Raksaki went one way or the other, he didn't quite know what to do. And it ended up
he was so good.
Raksaki's a very good player. Very good player.
Yeah.
I don't think there was a championship club who didn't ask if he was available on loan. So, yeah, no surprise. He could turn out to be the loan of the season. But it just worried me slightly that when I spoke to 1 or 2 people who cover Sheffield, they said, look, Larouci's very, very good going forward. Not quite so good at defending. So maybe that was the first sign of it on Sunday. Maybe we're judging him harshly because, as I say, going back to your former club and you want to try your best and you're under a bit of pressure. But, his sliding tackle that gave away the penalty was very ill-judged.
Yeah.
I actually thought at the time it was an absolute stone wall, no doubt about it, penalty. When I saw the replays, he doesn't actually make any contact, but because he dangles his leg out there, it makes it very easy for our blaster then just to make sure he touches it before he hits the ground. And without VAR, there's no referee who's not going to give that one from the angle that he
momentum took him, didn't it? So
it was just a very naive tackle. But then if you go back a step before that, when Moore played the ball across, our blaster runs past Sissoko, who I've just bigged up, but he runs past Sissoko, who's ambling back and gets himself into a position where Larouci feels he's got to go and try and do something. So I remember Rob Edwards always used to say, in every goal you concede, there'll be at least 3 mistakes. So while Larouci, we didn't concede, but we gave away a penalty. While Larouci made a very poor tackle, he could point and say, well, why is that bloke just run past our 2 midfielders that I've had to go and do them in the first place? And then someone will say, well, why was it Moore was allowed to get away down the left-hand side and have that much space? So with Larouci, jury's got to be out because we haven't seen enough of him. Very good going forward. Yeah. Just want to see him tested as a defender because on Sunday with James Morris there, he's still, that was his 4th game on the left side of a centre-back. That and Larouci not looking particularly comfortable meant that Raksaki had, the freedom of the park, and that's what went wrong with the first goal. When I've looked back on it, there's Raksaki out there, and neither Morris or Larouci get anywhere near to him. He's able to then come inside. Once he's done that, O'Hare has suddenly got the freedom of the penalty area. So as much as people will say, well, Dan Backman should have done better with the shot, yeah, maybe so. Ciarauta should have put in a better challenge, definitely. How you can run around with your hands behind your back, I just don't get it. But if you go back a step further, the ball shouldn't have got to O'Hare in the first place because Morris and Larouci weren't tight enough on Raksaki. So there are a lot of things about Sunday, but one that we still need to see is what Larouci's like as a defender, because going forward, no doubt about it, he's quick and he just attacks people. It's like having a Chak Vadadza out on the wing. But as a wing back, the second half of it is back, and you've got to be able to do that defensive work. And there were just a few question marks that on Sunday, maybe, as a defensive player, maybe Ken Stemmer's slightly better at that side of things than Larouci, but going forward, Larouci is obviously power and pace. So I think, we've got 4 really good wing-back options there, which means that we're not relying on Ngakia being fit. He's under less pressure. I really hope for his sake that he gets fit and he's able to play football, because he is a very genuine bloke, very bit shy, but every time I went to training ground in the summer, he was there doing extra work because he wanted to try and get fit. No, I've not met a professional footballer who likes being injured. I've met a few who are happy not to play and draw a wage, but I've never met any who like being injured. And Jeremy definitely falls in that category. He really wanted to be fit, and I feel sorry for him if he has picked up another injury that means he's going to be out for a while. But I genuinely hope he gets better and, either has a career with Watford or goes on to play somewhere on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, I've just got one last question for you, Andrew, and then we'll wrap things up. But I was wondering if you knew we've touched on it already, but is Tom happy with the squad that he's been backed over the summer that he's got now? Do you think there might be some dipping into the free agent market with Rivich going out? I think I read somewhere that there might be a recall option on the loan just in case, but is that setting up for sort of a January signing of a striker, or will there be sort of free agents popping up around here, or is Tom happy with what he's got and he's just going to sort of see how it goes?
Well, from everything he said to me, he's happy with the squad, very happy with his words, that he's emerged from the transfer window with pretty much everything he was hoping for, bar maybe that extra midfielder. But I think the only reason he really pushed for the extra midfielder was the injury to Loser. Up until that point, it was it's a bit of a seesaw. If Loser had been sold, then obviously we would have got another player in. But with Loser appearing to stay, there was no real need to. Then Loser gets injured, and suddenly we have to go and look for a player. So people think that this was a last-minute panic. That player that we went for was always in mind, and had Loser been sold in July, we would have started work on trying to bring him in. But Loser is obviously going to be here now till at least January. The fact he's injured was what precipitated the move for another midfielder. However, the injury isn't as bad as Tom first thought. When I spoke to him the morning after that game, he said, "Look, we could be looking at 2 months." Now it's more like 4 weeks, So, we might see him back end of September, early October. Hopefully, Musa and Tom come through that period. But as I say, having seen Duomo today, I wouldn't be too concerned if we had to play him, because he did look like a bit of a senior player in under 21 football. In terms of the strikers, if Rajovic goes, and I mean, as we sit here talking now, I'm just keep checking my phone like they do on Sky Sports, waiting for someone in Denmark to send me a message. I've suddenly become friends with 3 Danish journalists I'd never met before. But if that goes through, then I'm almost certain there's a recall clause in there, because if either Jebbison or Bayo were to fall down a hole, we would need to get Rajovic back. But you talk about January, if they're prepared to loan Rajovic out for the season, then it would suggest they're not going to rush in January to buy another or loan another striker, because they could have kept the one they've got. So we'll see. I mean, if Jebbison doesn't pull up any trees between now and January, then we might have to. But at the moment, I think the fact they're prepared to loan Rajovic out for whatever the reasons are, then that wouldn't suggest they feel that they need a third striker. As for the free agent market, I've not met a manager yet who really likes going into the free agent market, because it's a bit like when I used to play Football Manager, and whenever you went on the free agent market, they were just the duffs that nobody else wanted. It was the sort of ancient internationals, or someone who'd been out for 3 years with a knee injury, and you were taking a real chance on them. And in real life, there is a degree of that, because you're going to be signing players that no one else wants. That's why they're a free agent. Doesn't mean they're bad players, but they're just not fitted in anywhere. And you've got that issue of, even if they've been working hard and training, they're going to take a while to get up to speed. So if we were to sign a free agent now, you're probably talking before the next international break that they'd be ready, unless it was someone who had just recently left a club. Tom's not said anything about looking at the free agent market. I think if you look at what we've got now, he wanted to have 5 or 6 competitive centre-backs, and we've got that. He wanted 4 wing-backs. We've got that. He's got his number 9 that he wanted, which is Jebbison. He's got his 10s in Chakvadadze, Kayambe, Vata, Bar. And if you include Loser in there, you've then got 3 experienced central midfielders, plus Duomo, plus Ramirez Espan. I don't see that we need to go into the free agent market. It's always a bit of desperation when you do that. I'm sure there's other fans who'll be saying, well, you don't know what you're talking about. We desperately need this. We desperately need that. It'd be lovely to have a squad the size of Chelsea's, but you can't play them all. You can't keep them all happy. We certainly couldn't afford to have them all. So I think we've got much more depth to the squad than we had last season, when Val was here, and every week he would say he was happy with having 20 odd players and nothing more.
Yeah.
But that's fine until you pick up a few injuries and suspensions, or someone falls out of form. I think we're a deeper squad that have got players in each of the key positions: the centre backs, the wing backs, the number 10s, the 9s, the number 6s. There's cover in all those positions. There's competition in all those positions. Tom's not said anything about the free agent market, so my assumption is that between now and January, we go with what we've got. If something happens between now and then, that might change, but I think we're in a nice position where we're sitting here saying, do we need an extra player, in the knowledge that we've probably got enough in every position, even if we don't think that some of them are very good. And let's remember, the teams in the Championship don't always have world beaters in every single position. They just don't. That's why we're in the Championship, is because the players who are really good are in the Premier League, or they're in Serie A or La Liga. You will always have players in your squad that have got some shortcomings. That's why they're in the Championship. That's why people are even worse in League One, and so on and so on. So we may not have a world beater, international top-notch player in every position, but we've got players in every position that can do the job that Tom wants. And I've enjoyed it so far. If this carries on, then it might be really nice. It might be actually a pleasant change to go and watch Watford play and not think you're just waiting for them to concede. It's a nice position to be in.
Can I just ask 2 quickish sort of questions?
Of course you can.
One being Ryan Porteous. Obviously, I was actually quite surprised. Obviously, I know James Morris has been really good in that left centre-back position. But yesterday, I thought that being Sheffield United and being a really good side, obviously a tough place to go, that we saw Matty Pollock coming at Millwall and play that left-sided centre-back role. I thought he would shift things over a bit. Again, put Serialta back in the middle, maybe put Porteous at right centre-back. I just thought, like as we saw Gustavo Harmer being the dirtiest person ever on the pitch towards the end of the game yesterday, that we needed someone that would potentially go in and do that on some of their players yesterday, just to let them know that we were there. I thought we were a bit kind on him yesterday and just gave him a bit too much freedom of the pitch. Are you surprised that Porteous has not been included more? And there were whispers I did hear from a couple of people at the that I know fans said that there was also articles as well printed that there was a bit of interest of him potentially leaving in the summer window. Are you surprised he's not featured more, and were the rumours that he might have left true?
I did see a story somewhere, but I can never tell whether it's an actual news outlet or whether it's some fans who've created something that looks like a news outlet and then just put rumours up there. But he was never one I asked about, so I can't ever remember getting to the point of thinking it sounds like Ryan might be leaving. In terms of did I think he'd play on Sunday? Actually, no, because if you look back to the week before when we'd won, forget the fact we played the cup tie in the week. You don't generally change too much about a winning team unless you really have to. And although James Morris hasn't played there that much, he had a really good game, and it would have been quite harsh to leave him out. Plus, you'd have had to play the right-footed player on the left side defence, and we've already talked about that. It does make a difference. There's no doubt about that. I asked Tom about it afterwards, and he just said, it was my choice, my personal choice. I know I had Ryan there. He's more experienced. I chose to leave him on the bench, and I suppose as a manager, those are the decisions you have to make. You can't play everybody. Had we played Brian Porteous and he went in after 5 minutes and flattened Raksaki and got sent off, we'd all been saying, why'd you do that? I think you have to remember as well what Porteous went through in the summer with what happened at the Euros. It's got to have an effect on you. And he is a very confident and very well-spoken and sensible bloke, but even the most positive person in the world cannot go through, being sent off in a major finals, conceding a penalty, and then being banned for the rest of it without some baggage. And so I think the fact that we're easing him back in gently is good for all of us. It would have been harsh to have thrown him in just after that, because the eyes would be on him. Even our own fans would be looking. And I've seen this phrase that he's got this brain fart in him every game where he does one thing that you think, oh my God. That would be highlighted even more if we threw him straight into the team after what happened in Germany. So I think longer term, he's going to be in the team. But it's going to be nice because we're sitting here saying, should he be in the team or not? Whereas for many seasons, we knew certain players would get in the team because we didn't have anybody else. When you think now that Pollock's come to the fore, you've got Ogbonna, you've got Serialta, we've got Kevin Kedman who's going to come in. We've got options of players who can play in the same position. We aren't just, it's not a case of, well, those 6 have to play because we haven't got anybody else. Who's the other 5 we're going to pick?
Yeah.
There's a lot more competition. So the long answer that should have been short to your question is no, I wasn't surprised, but I don't think there was any threat of him leaving. And I think over time, we'll just see him eased back in. On merit, though. It may be that he can't get in the team, and that's a quality problem to have.
Of course, yeah. And just the last one, I know we all want him to, obviously, Tom, to stay throughout the season, and obviously you'll want him to. Obviously, with the backing that he's got, with the signings that he's got, and obviously the club have backed him, is the intention to back him for the season? Or could you see if there is a bad run of results that they will pull the trigger, or have they said quietly in the background, no, we're actually going to give this guy the year, we've got him the players that he wants, this is going to be it for the season?
Well, I really want to say hell or high water to that question, because that's generally how we answer those sort of things when you're at Watford. But look, if I could get inside the head of Pozzo and could predict what he's going to do next, I would use that skill to go and predict the lottery numbers on Friday and quit my job, head off into the sunset as a happy retired 50-something. The fact remains that we do not know what is in the owner's head. he's not very communicative. He doesn't like being criticised very much. I wrote something about him the other week that didn't go down particularly well, and yet I thought it was reasonably balanced. It would be nice if we knew what he was thinking. It would be nice if we knew what the plans were. But I think we're sort of all working in the dark and second guessing. If you think back to last season, around this time, the club gave a new contract to Ismail, and he was going to be stood by. And with 9 games to go, he was gone. Now, do I think that was the wrong decision? No, we were struggling. But then, was it a wise decision to give him a contract when he hadn't really done much to justify it? This is the randomness that you get at Watford, and it's what probably frustrates us the most. Is just when you think you know where you are, they do something that's out of left field, and you can't work it out. So I can't sit here and say, oh yeah, they're going to back him and he's going to be here for a long time. What I will say is Tom wants to be here, loves it, loves the job. As said, he found the summer harder than he expected because he put in a hell of a lot of hours. And he said to me the other day, we were just having a chat, and he said, I'm used to feeling physically tired. As a footballer, you feel physically tired. You play 90 minutes in extra time, or you have a really tough game and you come off and you're physically tired. He said, what I found this summer is I'm mentally tired. And he said, you don't often get that as a footballer. He said, but I'm spending hours, on laptops or in meetings or reading documents. And he said, that's something I'm not used to. And, he said, I suddenly find myself sitting there at midnight and not realizing I've spent 4 hours reading through stuff and looking at paperwork. So it's been a learning curve for him, but he enjoys it. He's an absolute delight to work with because he's courteous, he's interesting. We had a chat.
Suits him.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
He looks like someone. When he took the job, we had a chat, and because I've got to know him before that through the time that he played, and then when he was with the under-18s, and he was always very accommodating. He was always saying, do you want to come up and watch training, or he appreciated the fact that I went along to a couple of games and I followed the under-17s in their cup run. And when he got the job, we had a chat, and he said, look, I'm not expecting you to put lipstick on a Rottweiler when you write about what we do. I expect criticism when we play badly. All I ask is for you to be fair, and that's what I try to do. And in return, he's fair with me. And I'm not saying the other head coaches haven't been. The difference is, as I think I referred to earlier, is Tom is someone who knew Watford before he came to be head coach. He played here for most of his career. He stayed on and coached the under-18s. Very popular person around town. He loves what he's doing, even if it's tiring and even if it's challenging him in ways he didn't expect. And I think he's given it his all. And all I can say is, as I referred to earlier, I just hope they give him the time. I hope they're patient. I hope they back off and accept that because we've won 5 of our first 6 games, we're probably not going to win 15 of our first 18. It doesn't work like that. There's going to be hiccups. Yesterday was one of them. But, even in yesterday's defeat, that was still a lot better than most of the games that I watched last season, even the home ones. At least we were in it.
Yeah,
and,
I agree.
That's the thing. We lost. If there is a good way to lose, it's a bit like yesterday, where you've not played particularly well, you've not been steamrolled. On a different day, if you played better, you'd probably win. So even in defeat yesterday, I think there was enough there that we should be positive. But to go back to your point, Joe, God knows what the Pozzos are going to do next. If I knew that, like I say, I'd probably the last person they're going to listen to is me. But I hope I speak for a lot of fans when I say I just wish they'd let him get on with the job. He's off. Keep supporting him, and we can't deny they have. They brought in players. Let him, hire the staff that he wants. He's got the coaching set up. They've been very supportive. Now, just carry on doing that. Don't feel you need to go and twiddle the knobs and push some buttons. Let Tom do that. You get on with running the club.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew. Honestly, that's been amazing to speak to you. I feel like I could speak to you for hours about everything, but
trust me, I could get my wife, and you really wouldn't say that if you Yeah, I'm all right talking about Watford and Curry, but other stuff I'm not very interested in. But always happy to do it. I enjoy interacting with fans, because that's all I am. I'm just a fan who happens to write about games. Before this, I was just sat in the lower Grand Taylor with my sons. after this, I'll be sat in the rookery with my sons. It's just something I'm doing for the time being. I'm really only a fan, and when I write stuff, if people disagree with me, that's fine. My opinion is worth no more than anybody else's. I just put mine out there for other people to either agree with or disagree with. The main thing is that I can provide coverage for all the other fans that they want, and that I hope they find interesting and insightful and entertaining and a bit of fun, because that's what football should be. It shouldn't be a chore. And at the moment, it is fun, and I try to reflect that in what I do. But I certainly wouldn't think for 1 minute that God, I was useless at playing football. I've never managed. I'm just a fan. And so any chance I get to interact with fans, and I do it at games. If I see supporters, you get a little bit of people looking at you, and I can only imagine what it must be like to be truly famous, because it's nothing worse than someone looking at you and nudging their mate. And I just say to people, come and chat. I'm just a fan with a laptop.
Yeah.
If I wasn't sitting in the press box, I'd be sat in the rookery. I bought season tickets a couple of seasons ago before I did this job, and I expected to be sat there. And one day I will, but at the moment I sit in the press box. But that just makes me a fan with a laptop. So happy to do this, happy to do it again in future. And if I've given you a bit of insight and entertained you, then so much the better.
Yeah, thanks
You
very much.
definitely
Yeah, it's been
have.
great. It's been great.
Good. I'm glad.
And
Enjoy the
thank you, Joe, as
international
well
break. Enjoy the international break. No game on Saturday. It's funny.
Yeah.
I actually enjoyed the break, but when it gets to it, I think, this is no fun without a game.
Yeah. No, it's a bit boring.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So yeah, and thanks everyone for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and also interact in the comments. It would be great for you guys to hear what Andrew's saying, and if you disagree, if you agree, let us know. And we will see you after the international break. And stay safe, everyone. Bye.